we should tell everybody this podcast came about from what time in the morning was it when I called you? It might have been one of them late night ones, wasn't it?
Well, they all run together, but
it was a late night freak out UFO conversation. I was like, dude, we got to do a podcast about this. Because out of all of my friends that actually can understand physics and explain it, you comprehend it at a very high level. So if for things like this to be puzzling to you to the point where you actually want to talk about it.
Well, I don't want to talk about it because I got this one so wrong for years. I mean, there is no trace of me talking about UFOs, I think, before 3 years ago because I can't stand the topic. Unlike the rest of you, this thing hits very differently.
Well, I should say then I've gone back and forth.
Yeah, I know. I
abandoned it for a long time until I watched the Bob Lazar documentary. When Jeremy Corbell made that Bob Lazar documentary, I was like, God damn it, they got me back in again. They drew me back in again. I
don't know if there's ever footage of me saying the words Bob Lazar.
There it goes.
There you go. I know. But
I would love to facilitate that dinner.
Oh, let's do
you and Bob Lazar.
I don't know why. There's always this question about, is Bob Lazar a physicist? Was he trained at these places? And I have to imagine that that's an easily resolvable question because you can tell whether somebody is a physicist pretty quickly.
That's why I can't. It's like, you know what it's like? It's like fake black belts. There's a lot of fake black belts. And if you're a real martial artist, you watch it and you go, what the fuck is this guy doing? This is hilarious. But some people who don't have any understanding of martial arts go, oh my God, this guy's a death touch. He can just touch you behind the ear and you fall asleep. And people believe it.
Yeah, I thought I would just skip everything and go right to the 5-point exploding heart technique.
Yeah, so that is how I am when, physicists. I'm like, sure. I don't know what you're saying. I can't verify or deny.
Well,
but Bob Lazar is a very impressive person to talk to. And what's really impressive to me is that he's had the same exact story since the 1980s and the new footage of these crafts that show them rotating 180 degrees before they take off is exactly how he described.
So how do you want to ease into this?
What got you curious about it? If you had just decided that it was all horse shit, like what changed your perspective?
Okay, this is a really weird and interesting question. I had a different puzzle that I've been working on for years, which has to do with physics and is important to me in my work and what I care about, which is there is this crazy history between around 1953 and 1973 with an explosion of activity that sometimes goes under the name of the golden age of general relativity, where general relativity was sort of put in final form in the teens by Einstein and also Marcel Grossman, who never gets the credit for the original papers, I think, on general relativity.
Isn't that always the case?
Yeah,
there's always like some guy behind the scenes that actually wrote for Shakespeare.
Einstein is the genius, but he had a mathematical friend whose father saved Einstein. I think got him the patent job. So he's and there's like a meeting called the Marcel Grossman meeting. So he's a shadowy figure on the edge of the Einstein legend. I don't think he deserves the credit Einstein did, but if you look at the first paper on general relativity, before Einstein says anything concrete, the first paper he says something vague. That's 1913, and that's with Grossman. The next paper, he says something wrong. He publishes the wrong equation. Then he corrects the equation, and it's incomplete because it doesn't have the cosmological constant. And I think it's 4 papers before he has the equation that now dominates our understanding of the cosmos and the large.
Interesting.
And so then it goes silent, and effectively the smart kids are all following Bohr because Bohr and the quantum have so many open problems, whereas general relativity seems like pretty much a closed book. And that's until 1953. And something very bizarre happens in 1953, which we can get to. But then there's 20 years of explosion in general relativity, which, you've had Roger Penrose on your program before, so he comes from that era. And Stephen Hawking was interior to that era. Richard Feynman, of all people, was very active and gave lectures at Caltech. So my entry point was that when I was a young guy at the University of Pennsylvania, when I'd come home to L.A. for break, I'd go out to Caltech, and I would park in Feynman or Gell-Mann's parking spaces, which I just thought was the coolest thing in the world, that these people, these gods, had little stones with their names stenciled on it. So I would go park in Feynman's space, and I would go to the Caltech bookstore, and I found that there was something that was sold there that at the time I don't think was sold anywhere else, which was like the Feynman Lectures on Gravitation, 1962 to 63. And they were effed up. It was like Feynman says, I don't know how Einstein did his thing, but imagine that you didn't have the insight that this was all geometric based on a guy named Bernard Riemann's notion of what differential geometry is, the sort of the smooth surface geometry of curvature. And Feynman says, let's just imagine this was an ordinary field theory. Am I, Richard Feynman, smart enough to figure out the geometry just proceeding as if I was a particle theorist? And this is a very strange and interesting, wonderful thing to do. And these notes are fantastic. My question is, what happened between 1953 and 1973? Because the reason that I'm in part really animated right now is that this month, February 1st of 2023, is the exact 50th year anniversary of the stagnation in particle theory as measured by the movement from the Standard Model. So the Standard Model and general relativity are the two basic theories, the theory of the very small, the theory of the very large. They're incompatible in a certain level, but they're very similar looking at a different level. So this has been driving people crazy. And I say, in 1973, Crocodile Rock was the #1 song, or tie a yellow ribbon around the old oak tree. Imagine that song being at the top of the pops for 50 years with no respite. That's how impressive this is, right?
That's a great comparison. That's a great comparison.
So just imagine the platform shoes and the feet going up above.
So it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't make any sense. How did the world's smartest community stagnate this badly? This has happened once before in recent times, between 1928, when Dirac came up with something called quantum electrodynamics, which is electrons and photons interacting, light and a little bit of matter. And for almost 20 years, until 1947, we couldn't compute with this first quantum field theory, quantum electrodynamics, otherwise known as QED. And suddenly, in 1947, we held a conference at Shelter Island in the tip of Long Island. And they didn't invite the old people as much as they invited the young people coming after the success of the Manhattan Project. Now, the Manhattan Project gets remembered by us as a physics project, but it was really engineering because the theorists were unable to fight their way out of a paper bag. And so we gave them an engineering project, and they completely crushed it.